four-stage engine start.
NASA's Artemis program will use a lot of hardware to get humans back to the moon.
And liftoff of Artemis 1.
From the Space Launch System rocket at launch to SpaceX's Starship rocket for the landing. But at the heart of the Artemis program are the people who will be flying to the moon and back. I'm Will Robinson-Smith, reporter with Spaceflight Now. We wanted to learn more about how the people tie into the overall Artemis architecture, and so we reached out to the Johnson Space Center based in Houston, Texas, and they connected us with the Astronaut Office there, and more specifically, NASA astronaut Randy Bresnik. Bresnik flew to space twice.
Liftoff of Space Shuttle Atlantis.
Once in 2009 on board STS-129, and then again nearly a decade later in 2017,
turbo pumps at flight speed and liftoff.
as a member of Expedition 52/53. Since 2018, Bresnik has been serving as the assistant to the chief of the Astronaut Office. In that role, he helps manage the development and testing of the various pieces of the Artemis program where it will impact the astronauts using them. Randy, thank you so much for taking some time to talk with us here at Spaceflight Now. I really appreciate your time, sir.
Glad to join you this morning.
Absolutely. And, kind of want to start with you and allow folks in our audience to get a better sense of you. Having joined the astronaut corps back in 2004, been an astronaut for 20 years. If you can sort of give us the Reader's Digest version of, why this was an important, piece that you wanted to add to your career after, being with the Marine Corps, why did you want to add the astronaut corps to, your life's resume?
Well, it was something I found fascinating growing up as a kid, but something I never, really thought possible. But as I was fortunate to get a scholarship to go to college, the Marine Corps gave me a scholarship and then gave me a job afterwards, taught me to fly. Got an opportunity to serve as an F-18 pilot in the fleet across the world. It was like, what's next? And so then I went to test pilot school, became a test pilot, doing flight tests on Hornet and Super Hornet, and got a chance to instruct at the Navy test pilot school as well. And it's like, well, what's next? And it wasn't until I was at the test pilot school, and you walk in that first day and you kind of have that imposter syndrome because you look at all the plaques of all the graduates on the wall of the test pilot school, and you see the Alan Shepards and the John Glenns and and all the shelf, you're like, I'm kind of out of my league here, but was able to become a test pilot. And then a friend of mine had gotten selected to the 2000 class, and that really is like, wow, if they'll select him, maybe I've got a shot. And so, applied for the 2004 class. And you never know amongst the thousands that are applying why it was you. You get a chance to come down here and interview. And that for every person we select, we've got 10 or 12 other people that are eminently as easily as qualified. But just, I've felt fortunate these past couple of decades that NASA chose me, and I've been able to use all the experience I had, gain more as an astronaut, and being able to, help further human spaceflight with, these 2 decades of service here at NASA.
And in the most recent part of those 2 decades, obviously you've transitioned now to being the assistant chief of the Astronaut Office. I wonder, looking back on your time when you were commander of the space station on your second space flight, how much do you think that experience and leadership helped translate to the work you now do in your current role at the office?
Yeah, everything at NASA has allowed me to, put that experience into what we're doing now, and it's been so helpful because whether it was, being on a shuttle flight, a short duration mission where we're sprinting the whole time for 10 days, to the living and working in space and having it become my home for 5 months on Expedition 52/53. All of that is exactly applicable to where we are today, where now work in exploration, the Artemis program. Well, Artemis program is, from launch to splashdown in an Orion capsule that rides on an SLS rocket from a Exploration Ground Systems launch pad. And an Artemis mission will go to a gateway space station, and it will go to a lunar lander, and get in a space suit and then go on a lunar rover to move around. So all these things with space station and shuttle are perfectly applicable to the short duration part, the long duration part, the spacesuit parts. We haven't done spacewalks on space station. The part that we don't have experience with current generation is that taking you from a space station or a spacecraft down to another celestial body, and that's the part where we've fortunately been able to leverage our Apollo astronauts that are still with us, and they've been super helpful. And then using my experience as a test pilot to be able to fly new vehicles we haven't flown before, that's the whole profession. And so that is all, being at the right spot at the right time, where we have got all this new stuff that's going to take humans to another, surface of a celestial body, and being able to use that experience to help us get there as quickly and as safely as we can.
Well, before we talk about some of the new technology that you alluded to, want to pick up on something that you just mentioned, which is, having the fortunate opportunity to talk with some of those Apollo astronauts and get their guidance and insight into that experience. I wonder, maybe what's one particularly prescient piece of advice or just story that was shared with you that you feel like has really been impactful on some of the decision making that you've been making in this role, sort of overseeing the human element of Artemis?
The part that still amazes me to this day is that Apollo, went to the moon and they didn't know they could do it. It had never been done. And they were, scientists were surmising that, the lander could touch down or it could end up descending into a pit of dust and we'd never see astronauts again, before we ever did it. And so that level of unknown, just amazing. And the fact that they brought back, all these, hundreds of pounds of rocks and did it successfully over the 6 missions, certainly guides us. Here we are half a century later, though, it's been since 72 that we've had humans there. And so the fact that we've got, Charlie Duke and Jack Schmitt that have been able to come back here and field our questions about spacesuits, about rovers, things like that. But the one thing that was really most helpful was we're trying to go to the lunar South Pole because of the science and the opportunities there. Well, that has the sun at a very low grazing angle pretty much all the time. So that creates these really long shadows where you don't have atmospherics interacting with the sunlight and things like that. And so dark areas are really dark. And so it's not one of those things where you can just drive through a dark area and have your headlights pick it up. It is so dark, you have to kind of creep into the area, and wait for your eyes to adjust, your lighting to come up till we can actually see where you're going to know whether or not it's safe to either put a foot or drive your rover. Well, all that being said, we've got the Lunar Reconnaissance Orbiter pictures that our teams down here have been able to put into our simulators. So we've got a VR sim for doing spacewalks in a spacesuit, and we also have a wall of windows, so we are able to then put in a cockpit of a rover and be able to drive with that type of lighting on the lunar South Pole. So our teams have been working with the LRO data and other stuff to try and make that as realistic as possible. But where's the truth data? Where's someone saying, hey, the modeling and these visuals are correct? To be able to have Charlie Duke and Jack Schmitt come in and look at these things and validate for our team that, these are like 95% of what they remember seeing. And hey, you might want to adjust the, the scintillation here or the blossoming there and tailor these things to the few people that had touched down. That to me was one of the most amazing parts of having their expertise available right now.
And it also kind of pairs nicely with, some of the experience that you had in your astronaut training, having done one of the caves expeditions. Obviously, you had to figure out how to navigate through a similarly dark, similarly unknown terrain. And, how do you think that kind of, marries well with some of the advice that you got from Charlie Duke?
What for us, the caves expedition teaming up with the European Space Agency, it's been so phenomenal because it is such an extreme environment that none of us have ever experienced it. I've been into Carlsbad Caverns. I've been in Luray Caverns. I've gone in for an hour or two and walked along a pathway with lighting along the way, and seen the beautiful lights to light up the cavern. And looked into some of the dark abysses where they keep the railings up so you can't get too close. But to go into a place where there's no pathways, no lighting, the only lighting you have is on your helmet. You are, over 2 kilometers from the entrance of the cave, and having to get there with nothing to guide you. Everywhere you turn is something new. It's something unnatural. It's something you've never seen in your whole life on the surface. And so to experience that is one thing. To go live in it for a week or two at a time, it's surreal. I mean, I've never felt more like I've been on another planet than when living and working in the cave. And with only your soda straw of a light on top of your helmet to see, photography became an amazing insight because we would set people up around, put a camera on a tripod, open the shutter, and then we'd all take flashes and try and point them in different areas while the shutter's open. So then we could run around to the back of the camera when the shutter was closed and see what we had painted with our light or with our flashlights or with our flashes. Having no idea what it really looked like because our lights weren't powerful to see everywhere and certainly wasn't enough to see it all at one time. Again, it's a completely unknown environment, and there's definitely a fear of death every step you take because there's nothing planned. You have to look at where you're going. There are areas where they drop off, where if you make one wrong move, just like with a spacewalk, it is imminent peril. Or you go through a squeeze area, just no idea what's on the other side, and then being able to, see something completely new. And we were doing ours in 2000, I think 11. We were actually mapping out parts of the cave that had not been mapped out. So you talk about feeling like an explorer. I mean, we're coming back, drawing out the room. We're putting in measurements with our laser rangefinder, taking inclinations, coming back at the end of the day, putting that in the computer, and then seeing the 3D modeling of where our cave mapping was going. Man, it was really cool. I wish everybody could do it because it is so unique. The temperature's the same all day. The humidity's the same. The lighting's the same. You have no idea what time it is, and you eat on a schedule. You sleep on a schedule, just like the space station. Because space station, you get a sunrise and sunset every 45 minutes. So you don't know what time it is. Your body doesn't know, when to eat and all that because your circadian rhythms. So, very good analogs for space and very good analogs for exploration.
Well, jumping off of the point you made about spacewalking, obviously, with your role in the Astronaut Office now, overseeing the various human components of the Artemis program, want to, point to the spacesuits that are obviously, in development right now from Axiom Space. And we saw the final versions of those unveiled at the recent International Astronautical Congress. And I wonder, what your thoughts are on those suits right now. Obviously, you and your colleagues have, I'm sure, given quite a bit of input during the development process, but, want to gauge your thoughts on where it is now and the work left ahead before they're actually put into use.
Well, it's not just PowerPoint. I was in the suit week before last. I'm in the suit next week. And not only are we evaluating the suit as it's in development, last week was one company. We have 3 lunar rovers that are in the early stages and in competition right now. So I'm in the new lunar spacesuit evaluating, a potential lunar rover prototype, and then next week a different company's rover. So we're developing 2, new things for our Artemis architecture at the same time. So as a test pilot, I mean, I'm in hog heaven. There is no better time to be here when we're doing all this new stuff. And so, the suit's coming along. It gives different mobility than the Apollo astronauts had for a surfer suit, which is amazing. You see the videos of, there's one where John Young is putting in a core sample, and it actually sinks quicker than he expected, so he ended up going prone. And you see him trying to do the push-up because the suit didn't bend here, and he didn't have the ability to bring a leg out underneath him. So here he is trying to do this push-up and get his legs underneath, and he finally eventually, has to push himself up and quick scoot his legs underneath to get in the vertical. We can go in the suit, we can go down on one knee and then pick up a sample. And so that is just unheard of mobility. I've been, in our exploration suit on a treadmill, running at 5 kilometers per hour, and the mobility in the hips and the legs and the ankles and the waist is so much better than what they had. It's going to be a whole different ball game when we get there. It's your own personal spacecraft, and so it has to be able to sustain life, be robust enough to be able to work on the lunar surface, deal with all that, lunar regolith that gets into everything and is very coarse as far as the granularity of it, and so it has to be able to survive all that. But the neat part is we'll figure out how this suit works and how the bearings and the wheels and seals and all this stuff works on the moon. And once we can figure it out on the moon, it's going to be easier to take all that stuff, having brought down the risk here at the moon, when we go to Mars, knowing that it'll work, because Mars has an atmosphere, it has those windstorms, it has evidence that there was water, tumbling the rocks, and there's erosion on all the particles that are on that surface. So they're not going to be as destructive to our motorized pieces and our bearings and things like that as the moon. So that is a huge amount of risk that our hardware should be able to function well on the Martian surface if we can figure out how to make it work long term on the lunar surface. Sorry, bit of a rabbit hole there, but I think it's really neat to see how our next door neighbor here, a few days away, is going to help us when we go to Mars, months and months away.
No, 100%. It all very intentionally ties together, of course.
Yeah.
Before we hop off the suits real quick, I guess, what's the next, whether it's an agency level check-in or, something that ties the Astronaut Office back in, that's a review of the suits, design or functionality?
We're working on the design and the functionality. We're evaluating the suits. We've got where we're actually doing stuff where we're not offloaded and we're able to go to different areas of the lunar rovers. We have other parts where we're actually offloading the suits. So, the suits, 300-ish pounds, and I'm, 170 pounds, and together we're, 500 pounds, and we offload the suit so that it's at lunar gravity or 1/6 Earth's gravity. So to me, it feels like about, 85, 90 pounds. And you get that feeling of being able to, do that, you saw the Apollo astronauts just kind of leap up, and do the salute to the flag and things like that, like John Young did. You could do that in the suit down here. And so it's really gives you a good element to be able to evaluate things when you're not, weighed down by the Earth's gravity of the suit. So that's helpful. We have design reviews coming up all next year, where we're actually going to be, are they meeting the requirements, or do we adjust the design and things like that? So that's all happening per normal, and we're trying to get this done as quickly as possible. And so it is imperative. It doesn't matter if we have a lunar lander if we don't have a lunar suit. It doesn't matter if we have this lunar surface suit if we don't have a lander. So these things all have to happen at the same time for us to be able to make the first lunar landing since 1972.
Well, turning to the other side of that coin you just presented, the lander, obviously, as we're talking right now, it is Wednesday, November 13th, and SpaceX is marching towards Flight 6 of its Starship rocket. We had the opportunity to talk with Dr. Shinaki with the HLS program office prior to Flight 5, and he impressed upon the importance of being able to catch the booster in order to get that rapid launch cadence that's needed to support the Artemis missions. I wonder, before we talk about sort of the superfine human elements of it, what was your impression of Flight 5 and, your thoughts on where the Starship development currently is now, given that it's, as important to Artemis as it is?
Well, I was fortunate to be, in the job I'm in 2018 when we started writing the requirements and stood up the HLS program, and there when we selected, SpaceX in the spring of 2020 as our first provider for a lunar lander, and we've been working with them, since 2020 on the design and development of it. And so when they, we started seeing Boca Chica get built up, and went down to visit it, and then saw them, building that tower, and these chopsticks were sticking off from it, and they came up with this, design, and understood that was how they're stacking it. And then when they informed us that, oh yeah, we're going to catch that upper stage, like, that's bold. That is bold. All right. And it's one of those things you almost go, okay, what's plan B if that doesn't work, But to have that be in development, watch them land their first stages of the Falcon 9 for several years now, and how revolutionary that is. I think I just saw, they had one booster do its 23rd landing. Just, and you think about the cost, and that being the most expensive part of the rocket, that they've got 23, amortized that rocket's cost over 23 launches is, we're moving so fast, I don't think people realize how revolutionary that is. And so take that up a notch to where you've now got these super heavies with all these Raptor engines and how expensive it is. To see that thing come back and fly next to structure and come in and get caught by those chopsticks was, the next, revolutionary piece. The fact that, the Falcon 9s have to go back to a launch pad or the launch recovery ship, right? And then they have to get transported to the launch site. Well, to be able to catch it by your launch site, and catch it in the chopsticks and just move it over to your launch mount, inspect it, fuel it, and launch it again, another level of efficiency that is just, never been done. And so those revolutionary steps are the things that are going to help not only the Artemis program, but humanity, have space become a normal place where spaceflight hopefully becomes as as normal as airline travel is, hopefully in our lifetimes.
Well, and you and your colleagues get the benefit of not only seeing the development of the plane in this metaphor, but being able to craft the cockpit and the where the passengers are going to live and work. And so we've seen a couple of glimpses in various pieces of the exterior of the HLS mock-up of Starship, a little bit of the interior. But I wonder if you can sort of bring us into what it looks like, what it feels like, what it smells like, maybe. What is the thing that's being crafted for your colleagues to fly on in the very near future?
The biggest thing to note with Starship, having been in other spacecraft, is how big it is. That is just such a unusual thing for us for a dynamic spacecraft. Space station is the size of, they say, like a 5-bedroom house on the interior volume, and but to have go from an Orion or a Soyuz, like I flew, or a shuttle, and just go into the expanse of the flight deck of Starship is just amazing. Where you've got a part of it where it's the flight deck where the seats are, where the controls and displays are, and then you've got on the same floor you've got the habitation areas, the hygiene areas, and then you go down into another deck below to where you then have access to the airlocks, which then go to what they call the garage, with the garage being the part that's exposed to vacuum, where you end up would exit the airlocks in your spacesuits to be able to hop on the elevator to then go down to the lunar surface. And so, obviously very new concepts to where you have such a large lander that is as tall as it is, and that we've got to take an elevator down to the surface to get past all the levels of the tanks and the engines and everything that are below the crew compartment. VR has been helpful in these past several years as they before they've gotten full-size mock-ups available. It's pretty neat to, do VR when you're looking at the design of the airlock and where to put the hatch, what size is the hatch, and you get into the garage area of where the elevator is. And I remember being struck a couple of years ago where in the VR, you come out of that airlock and you're kind of in a enclosed area, and then that garage door is open where the elevator goes out, and you would actually go on the surface, and you could go out there in the VR, and then from 30-ish meters up above the lunar surface, look out at the expanse of the lunar surface, with the graphics they have, and you get a glimpse of what it will be like for those first humans to see the surface, not just from the surface itself, but to see how this visual expanse before they go down to the surface to go explore. It's going to be amazing.
Yeah, I mean, obviously the Apollo astronauts didn't have the benefit of standing on essentially a skyscraper and looking out at the expanse. Dr. Shinaki also mentioned that the Astronaut Office has regular meetings with SpaceX to workshop and talk through things that he said that y'all call office hours. I wonder if you can sort of take us into that process. What are some of the things that you're wanting to see, changed, altered? What is that workshopping like during those office hour meetings?
Well, I mean, it's neat because it's a process, and it's unlike like Dr. Shinaki probably mentioned. We're not buying the car like we used to with our programs. We are getting a service. They're having a lunar lander in lunar orbit that we will use for the lunar surface, more like a rental car type of idea. And so we have requirements, but it's up to them to see how they implement. So it is us bringing expertise that they can use as they come up with their ideas and innovate on how to implement those requirements. They're able to go, hey, here's what we're thinking about, and we can go, okay, yeah, that's great. Let's, that will work. Or hey, here's an area that we might have issues. Or have you considered this? Because they don't have any astronauts on their staff. That's where our partnership is so helpful, obviously, to them, and then also where ultimately the customers are going to have to be be using this vehicle. And so it is a constant iterative process. There's always something that they're working on that they could use some insight, some validation on, or just answer their questions on our thoughts on it. We've got such a wide base of astronauts that have flown on different vehicles and lived and worked in space, that even though right now they're building one of their starships for us for this lunar landing mission, for taking 2 crew members down and then ultimately 4 crew members down to the surface. We also know that they're, a company that's building their Starship for other purposes as well, where they want to take a lot more people on their Starship and go on, voyages in our solar system. And so that's where, when they have questions, we're able to share our, long duration experience and help them, not say influence their designs, but inform them as they make their designs.
To that point, you mentioned that the critical design review for the spacesuits is coming up next year. I wonder, obviously there's a number of milestones from a technology standpoint that Starship still needs to prove out on the HLS side, and we talked to Dr. Shinaki sort of about the timeline for that. But speaking specifically to the human side of it, the working with the elevator, the inside the garage, inside the crew quarters, what are some of the timeline milestones that you're looking at, checking off, and when are those coming up that you're looking forward to?
Well, certainly, you mentioned the elevator, and when they first brought up that concept, everybody looked with wide eyes, an elevator, but yet SpaceX moves so quickly and they build hardware to prove out these concepts they have. And they were actually, took an area over where they have a boring tunnel access over by their SpaceX complex in Hawthorne, and they built an elevator, and we're able to actually, mock up the garage, push out the elevator, get in the elevator, descend down to the part where the boring tunnel starts, and prove out that, this is an eminently doable concept. And we have even evaluated it in spacesuits to hey, where are the controls, what controls, how do they operate, are they big enough for gloved hands, and work through all that. That being said, one of the big milestones, obviously, was being able to see how they are going to reuse the Super Heavy and the Starship, the tanker starships. Obviously, Ship 5 was amazing. They're trying to launch Ship 6 on Monday. So, one data point, was great. Be great to be able to see this be repeatable and see that they've got some longevity on the concept. And then it'll be trying to catch the Starship tankers as well. So catch the first stage, catch the tanker up top that'll be refueling. The biggest milestone, we're looking at, next year is to see how those tankers can refuel the propellant Starship in Earth orbit and transfer that, cryogenic rocket fuel in space to fill up the depot that's going to be sitting up there that the HLS Starship has to get its gas from after it launches, because it can't launch fully fueled. So that's the next, biggest milestone. Both Blue Origin and SpaceX need to demonstrate that technology, because it is an essential widget to making the whole architecture work.
And, last question, I suppose, since I know our time is running short here now. You've had the opportunity as a test pilot to fly in quite a number of, fantastic vehicles, including obviously the Soyuz and the Space Shuttle. I wonder, looking back on your flying experience, and thinking how it translates to these other vehicles you're working on, how those sort of stack up in your mind, and, I'll throw the Goodyear blimp in there too, since you mentioned that in a previous appearance.
What was the question part about that, though?
Oh, just sort of how the multitude of various vehicles that you've, had the chance to, pilot or fly in, really sort of comes down to a fine point in this moment in your career.
The best airplane or helicopter or spacecraft you fly is the next one. And throughout my career, I've been fortunate to fly a lot of different things, and that really helps me offer up suggestions and opportunities for designers to consider when they're making these new vehicles, whether it's our Blue Origin vehicle, whether it is SpaceX with the Starship, whether it's these lunar terrain vehicle providers. Having seen a bunch of different things, some stuff that's worked, some stuff that hasn't, I'm able to offer up ideas and suggestions to go, have you considered this? What about putting it here instead of there? What about having the flexibility to look at a display this way and then turn it, have it be able to move and do this way, so that you don't have to have 2 displays in different places. And so that's, I think where I hope that I'm a force multiplier for the office and for humanity's development into the cosmos, because I am able to take terrestrial-based stuff, my space-based experience, and help us get to off Earth and beyond Earth a lot quicker than if we were just trying to do it with PowerPoint and by trial and error.
Well, Randy, there's never enough time to talk about all the things we want to get to, but certainly appreciate you spending some time and look forward to talking again in the future.
My pleasure, Will. Thank you very much, and ad Astra.
Ad Astra.